Okay, so today we're going to begin with exercise 219, and my guess is that most of you aren't at a place where you're really ready to do your final exterior renderings. But given the number of class days that are left, I have to proceed as if you are. So a large number of you will save what I have for you today and wait until later on. But this also means that you guys need to be finishing up, getting this model well developed, etc. But at the same time, because we're going to use our file as a block reference, even if it's not perfectly resolved, you can still do a lot of what I'm talking about today in terms of figuring out where it's going to go into the site, even if it's in a more massing state than a fully developed final rendering state. And that's OK. So first off, I'm going to start by opening up the file that I've been working on that has my building in it. And obviously, I've used the same file for many semesters, so my building's fairly well resolved at this point, and yours probably won't be this resolved quite yet. But this file is oriented right on the standard origin. Nothing particularly fancy about it, other than I've spent some time building my basic geometry. There's a few pieces that, as you're looking at it, look a little funny. This wall here, for example, is a retaining wall. It looks a little funny with no site there, but I'm guessing, because I haven't actually put this into the site, that this is somehow the site's going to come down along here and I'm going to need this wall. Furthermore, I know that this building's going to be sticking up out of the ground because it's on the side of the hillside, so I've given myself a bunch of extra wall down at the bottom. It's much more than I need, but it's going to intersect with the site and help that happen. If you're unsure of how deep to make things like this, don't worry about it until you get it into the site, and then you can revise it later and add these kinds of things later on. In terms of my layer organization, remember layers are really important going forward because we're going to be using these layers a lot. You're going to define your layers primarily by material, object and material. So if we look at my layers, I have a master layer called Artist Retreat. Below that, I have default, and I have a layer for blocks, so that when blocks come in, they're all going to be on that layer. Then I have an interior layer with a bunch of sublayer, interior walls, concrete walls, stair railing, decor. I have an exterior roof, exterior walls, and roof cap. I have a landscape layer that includes my patio, an exterior concrete wall, glass railing, railing posts, etc. So I'm trying to organize as I go forward. I have, I have some layers for pools. I'm going to show you pools later on, so don't worry about that, or fountains or whatever. I have a layer called construction, which when I just need a layer to work on, I tend to work on that. Ultimately, that can get deleted. I also have brought in a bunch of blocks already. We're going to go through how to bring in these blocks later on. I'm leaving them in for right now, but I'll show you that when we get to the interior part. And they're all as reference files, which is as they should be. So I have this file is my base retreat file. This is the file that has the building in it. Into this file, I brought some blocks like furniture and lights and whatever. We'll talk about bringing those in as we go forward. But this whole file is going to be inserted into the site file as a block. So I'm going to go ahead at this point and save this file. So it's saved. I do also have all my materials assigned and my texture mapping done. That would happen in this file as well. Now we need to create and build the site file, the master site where all the rendering is going to happen. So I'm going to go ahead and just minimize this for right now, and I'll open up another brand new Rhino 5 file. And the reason that I'm doing this as two separate files is because I want to be able to jump back and forth between those. If you're in your existing Rhino file here and you go to File and then Open, it will close your building and open the other file. So you run into a problem where you don't have them. I like to have them open in parallel so I can make adjustments and update from those adjustments. So I'm going to create a new large object inches. And there I am. My units are in inches. That's good. This is going to be my master site file. This is the one that all the rendering is going to happen in. This is the one that all the lighting is going to go in eventually, etc. So right here, I'm going to go to File, Save As first, and I'm going to put it into my, my OneDrive, and I have a folder for Assignment 205. And it's going to go right in there, And I'm going to call this master site. Oops. Spring of 2018. There it is. And I'll go ahead and click Save. So this is the file that all the rendering is going to happen in. But before I can actually do the rendering, I have to bring my building into the site in the first place. So I need a site before I can bring the building in. So we have to start by creating the site. I gave you guys in that file, sorry, we're still looking at stuff from last class here. Under your assignments, if you go to 205, at the bottom, there's a zip file with the site information. You probably downloaded it last class. Inside of that file is a SketchUp file. We've worked with SketchUp files before. If I go to File and then Import, I can bring in that SketchUp file. So let me go to my site information. There's my two, Site 1 and Site 2. I'm doing this one on the coast, so I'm going to pick Site 2, and I'll go ahead and click on Open. All of these default options are just fine. I'll say OK, and it will bring in the site for me. The little person that came in with it doesn't matter, so ultimately I'll delete that. There's the person right there. She can go away. And when it came in, I got a Google Earth terrain, a layer 0, a Google Earth snapshot layer. It looks like everything turned it out on layer 0. So just as we did before, I'm not going to delete any of this Google stuff, but I am going to work with this surface to create a new Rhino surface for it. So I'll go ahead and create a layer for, and we can call it terrain. I'll make that my current layer. And I'm going to do the same contours, contours X, contours Y, like we did before. So this should all be repetition. Let me do a sublayer for contours. And I'll do a contour. I'll select my base point. I might have to turn on vertex to be able to snap to that corner. There we go. We're going off in this direction. I'll do it at 100 feet. And we'll do, let me do it a little tighter than that. Let me do it at 50 feet. Go. We'll go in this direction by 50 feet. We can turn off layer 0, and now I have all of my points, or all of my lines, my contours. Let me do a little trim of those lines. So I'll go into the top view, zoom, selected. We'll make that big, and we'll trim off some excess here. So I'll go to trim. And we'll trim off this excess. And I think that line actually all lines up, so I don't need to trim that edge. Once I have all of these pieces together, I'm going to do that network surface. So we'll take all the contours, and we'll go to my surface, curve network, or network SRF in the command line. If it did it correctly, I'll see A, B, C, and D on my, my sides here. I'll say OK. And after a little pause, maybe a little longer than a little pause, I will get my surface. There it is. Remember, it's that super dense surface. So as I zoom in, I'm going to click on that nice dense surface, rebuild. Chances are it's going to be 100 by 100. And I'll go ahead and say OK. So all of that smoothed out. We can turn off the contours. Oops. I have my layers on backwards. There we go. Let me put the contours on the correct layer. And now I can turn them off. There we go. And so now I have the piece of terrain that I'm going to start working with. And this represents my site. And you would be doing the same thing for the mountain site. So now I need to think about where on this terrain do I want to situate my building. And so, like I said before, my building was kind of designed to nestle into the side of the cliffs. That was always what I was thinking. So one of these shoulders would work kind of nicely. Maybe this one would work nicely, or maybe this one would work nicely. So now I need to bring in my block of my building and see how it fits and see if I like it or not. So I'll go ahead and go to Edit, Blocks, Insert Block Instance, or press Control I, and I'm going to go browse for my, not a SketchUp file this time, we're looking for my Rhino file, which is right there. It's my Retreat Base 2018. I'll go ahead and say Open. And so just like we've done before, it comes in. We're going to bring it in as a block instance. I'll go ahead and say OK. And at this point, I want to make sure that my block definition type is a link and my layer style is a reference. I'll say OK. And in a second, I'll see my building. There's my building. So now it's a matter of figuring out how it sticks on the site. So I'm just going to click somewhere for right now to just stick it in place. And it's kind of floating. It's not really where I want it just yet. And now I can start to work with it. So sometimes it's helpful to do it in perspective. Sometimes it's helpful to do it when you have multiple views. Sometimes if you change the top view to be shaded or rendered, you can kind of help yourself out a little bit by seeing the shadows. And so I'm going to start by moving. And I'm actually going to turn off for right now all of my object snaps. I'm going to disable them so that I can just start to work and get it placed in sight. So we'll move it over. So from the top view, that's looking like about where I want it to be. But if I look at it in the side view, it's definitely not in the site. It's not at the right elevation. So I could move it out just a little bit, which would help. I could move it this way just a little bit, which would help. And we're starting to get somewhere. All right, it's sticking out okay. I think it could probably stick back in a little bit more. So let's take it, and this time I might do it in the perspective view so I can see it a little bit better. Let's move this in a bit more. All right, that looks okay from the front. Let's come around here. Doesn't look like I'm cutting anything off. No windows, etc. Now, this worked fairly easily for me because I've done it before. So I know where it's going to go. I'm cheating a little bit, because I know where it's going to go, I know it's going to fit, and I've already kind of worked my model around this location. Not this precise location, because obviously this is a little different than I did it last semester, but I have a general idea. When you bring yours in the first time, it might not fit very well. And you might have to make some modifications, you might have to add some support structure, you might have to add some concrete or whatever to get it to fit. Obviously, if you're doing something that's more flat, more on the top of the hillside, it's a little bit easier to get it to stick in place. But you get the idea. So now that I've stuck this into my building site, like that, we see that we have some problems. Because my terrain goes right through kind of the stairwell here. Furthermore, my retaining wall, this all kind of dips down behind my retaining wall. It's not quite integrated just yet. So I need to make that integrate. So the first thing that I'll do is I'll give myself, I'll move layers. So we'll go to maybe layer 3. And while I'm here, let's delete some of these other layers that I don't need. Let me rename layer 3 here, and we'll call this construction. And layer 0, I'm just going to call this SketchUp. And I could ultimately delete that if I wanted to. OK, so I'm on the construction layer. What I need to do is I need to trace around the outside of my building. And I'll do this in the top view, and I'll do it rather carefully. Let me switch out of the shaded mode into the wireframe mode. And I'm going to use the polyline tool. And I'll start at this corner. Let me turn back on my snaps. I'll go to that corner. And I'll work my way around the building. Let me turn off center snap too, because that's messing me up. Come on. There we go. So I'm working my way around the outside of the building. I have a little ledge on some of these, the roof caps, the wall caps on the roof. Okay, that's why it's slightly inside. So there's my curve. Now if I look at this curve in 3D, it goes all over. It goes up and down, and it's not particularly useful. But that right there is the outline of my building. So now I can go back into the top view, and I can use my project command. So I'll type project onto that surface. And the resulting curve is right on the surface and represents my building. So with that selected, I can come in and I can do a trim. And I can trim out that center bit of the terrain to make it go away. So if I were to hide my block, we'd see that I just cut through the side of that terrain based on the footprint of my building, which allows me to have a building there and not have the terrain go through it. So I was able to integrate the block that I created into the site. It's now nested into the site. It feels like it sits into the site correctly. I have another issue, though, and that is that this back edge doesn't quite correspond to the way I wanted it to go. I wanted to have a little bit of a retaining wall here. So I need to deal with fabricating a bit of a surface right there. I can tell where this wall intersects the surface by where this and this intersect. So let me use an intersect command. So I'll take, let's see, what do I want to do here? I don't want too many lines. Let me do a temporary layer just in case this creates too many sublayers. And I'll do an intersect. I was a little afraid that this would create too many. Okay, let's scratch that for just a second. Let me instead create a surface. And I'm going to do it from, let me hide this for just a second. I'm going to create a surface from right there back to the end of my wall, which is right there. That gives me an intersection between this and this. That'll work a little bit better. So I'll do intersect to get that line. That was what I was looking for. So now that I have that line, I'm going to work from the end point of that line over here. There it is. And I'm going to go up to my wall. I could do the midpoint of that wall. That's fine. So again, this line isn't on the surface. But if I went into the top view, I could project that onto the surface. So let me type project. And we'll project it onto that surface. And now, using that new projection line, I could either split or trim off this piece of the surface. So let's go ahead and just trim it. or not. Try a split. Split failed. You gotta love it when that. It's always good when you're demoing things and it doesn't work, right? Something must not fully intersect. That's because I don't have a line that goes down this side. There's a little bit of this that wasn't cut through. So bear with me for one more second to solve this problem. One more project. So that plus this line should now let me trim it. There we go. So essentially what I was able to do is I was able to get rid of a little bit more of the surface, and now I can fabricate a new surface that goes in here. I already have this line. It's easy to come up with the lines on my walls here. What I need is I need a line that goes from here down to that corner of the wall. So if I wanted it to be straight, that would be easy. I could just go from that point to that point, and I could use that as my curve. If I wanted this to be more flexible, I could rebuild it, and we could rebuild it by, I don't know, let's say 3. I could show my points. Oops. Why didn't it do it? Let me try rebuild one more time. Rebuild, let me do it. It's 5, 5. Sorry, degree is 3. And points on. And somehow it just really doesn't want to do it for me. Anyway, clearly it's not my day, right? So we'll just leave it straight. I have that. I need a line that goes along here. So we'll go from right there over to that corner there. We'll do a line that goes from there back to that intersection point right there. There it is. I'm going to explode that so it's separate segments. So let me type explode. And now I can hold down Shift and select that line and also that line there. And it looks like I snapped to the wrong point. So hold on a second. Let me take this one more time. That point to that point. Okay, so there plus that plus that, and finally the one up at the top here plus that, and now I can do my curve network. So I'll go up to Surface, Curve Network, and I'm able to build in that piece of terrain. So now it fits in with that wall, and it feels like it's part of the overall terrain. Basically, I rebuilt that piece. Does that make sense? So it took a little bit of work to get there because I had to split it off and trim it and then ultimately create this extra little piece of surface. But now this building really starts to feel like it belongs as part of the site. Like I said, we had a lot of budget, so doing this giant concrete wall to support this site I'm not overly worried about, but in reality that would be a very expensive design choice. Anyway, we're not going to dwell on that for too much. So now that I have this into the site, there's a few more things that I have to start thinking about as part of this site. And so first off, I have the site. I don't have any materials on it. We'll get to materials in just a second. But there's no infinite plane yet, and there's also no there's no ocean or anything. It's just some terrain, we have a general understanding that there is an ocean here, but I don't have any materials on it. I haven't done anything special to it. So to make your life a little bit easier, I have a block that I've set up for you that you can bring in as a block that will represent the ocean. And so if we go to the Digital Tools site and we go to Resources and we go to the Rhino Blocks library, if I go to Landscape, this last choice, there'll be a few things that you'll want. If you're doing the ocean, if you're doing the one on the coast, you're going to want the ocean block. If you're doing the one in Lake Tahoe, you're going to want the Lake Tahoe block. I have one for each of you, so it's fair. No matter which site you get this piece. For me, right now, I'm doing the ocean, so I would click on the ocean, and I'm going to download the Ocean 3DM Rhino block. There is also a special ocean material that goes with it. So if you don't have the ocean material, you're going to have to download that piece as well. I can't remember whether I included it in the material things that you downloaded earlier in the semester. Once you've downloaded the ocean, it should say ocean1.3dm, I'm going to copy it over into my folder. So let's go into today's assignment folder. Go into my folders here. There it is, spring 2018. And I'm going to put that ocean in this folder. So there it is, Ocean 1. I'll go back over to Rhino. And again, this is happening in the site file, not my building file. I'll go to Edit, Blocks, Insert Block Instance. And I'm going to go find that ocean file. And what the ocean file is it's kind of like an infinite plane, but not really. And that is that it's a giant dinner plate, if you can imagine a dinner plate. So it's a big circle, but at the very edges it curves up just a little bit. And so when we apply the ocean material, in order to get the textures, we can't use an infinite plane, as convenient as that would be, because it won't give us the up and down textures. It won't give us the waves on the ocean. So this is our way around that. So it's a giant disk that has curved edges on it. So I'm going to just drop that in to the site. It ends up being a little bit high when I first bring it in, so I'm going to need to move it down. So I'll type move, and I'm going to move it vertically. So I'll turn on vertical. And as I move it down, I want to find the point where it kind of becomes a beach. So we'll say it's right about there. So this now is representing that big piece of ocean, that big piece of water for myself. I need to make sure that that has the correct material on it. I'll go to my materials, and I should have a material called water or ocean. There it is. It looks really funny in the materials, but it's there. So we'll go with it. It looks like it came in with my block. That's good. You may have to reload it if you need to. So now I have the ocean established. And I really should put this on a blocks layer. So let me give myself a new block, new layer, and we'll call this blocks. And we'll move it onto the blocks layer. Change object layer. And furthermore, this should be on the blocks layer as well. Change object layer. And I probably should clean up my layers just a little bit more. So let's do a layer for master site. Let's do a sublayer for environment. We're getting there. Let's do a sublayer. Well, we already have blocks, so let's just make that a sublayer of the master site. Let's do the terrain as a sublayer of the master site. My construction layers can live outside of that. That's fine. And ultimately, I'll probably delete the default layer. There you go. I'm just trying to keep things organized because they're going to get out of hand before too long. So now I have the ocean. I have the terrain. I have my block. And I'm starting to get somewhere. I'm starting to get this stuff figured out. I need to establish my HDRI, my background images, and I need to establish the sun. Those are the next two pieces. So you guys previously had to come up with what your HDRI was, etc. I'm going to try to help you out a little bit. Again, just like I gave you the ocean file or the Lake Tahoe file. Under Resources, if you go to Vray Materials Library, there's a subheading here for Quick Rendering Setups. And I know I've pointed this out before. These are your scenes that I've established for you. If you're doing the ocean, the good one to use would be the Malibu Overlook. I know it's in Malibu, not Northern California. but it's still an ocean, and it kind of helps us out. So you want to make sure you download that Malibu Overlook.zip file. I already have it downloaded, so I'm not going to worry about it. And it tells us right here what our sun settings should be. So we're going to be in San Francisco on 6/15/2016 at 2:45 p.m. with daylight savings time turned on. So I'm going to go back to my file here. I'm going to create a sun. So I'm on the environment layer, sublayer for sun. We'll make that active. And I'll create a sun. Uncheck manual control. We'll come down here to San Francisco. There it is. And it was 6:15. 6:15. Oops. 15/2016. And it was at 2:45 p.m. and daylight savings time was turned on. So by giving you that information, I've helped you figure out what the sun setting should be. So you don't have to do the sphere and look down and figure out where it should be. I've given it to you. So we've got it set up. I need to make sure that I actually insert the sun. So let me say OK, and then let me make sure I drop the sun into my site. There it is. My sun's on my site. That's good. Now I need to go ahead and load that Malibu HDRI background. So I'll go into my Vray options. I'll go to my environment, and I'll load it in here and here. Now I made it a little bit simpler for you as well. There's a lot of other settings like the shutter speed and the camera and whatever. All of that will come in if you download and load this Malibu Overlook irbf.visopt. So I've put all the settings together for Vray. All you have to do is download this. If you click on this, it will open something that looks nasty. We don't want that. Right-click on it and say Save Link As, and put it on your flash drive where you know where it is. So if I go in here, back to my master site file, I open my Vray options. It's always a good idea to leave one of the drawers open. It doesn't matter because you'll be able to tell that it loaded because it closes all the drawers after it loads. And right here, there's a button for Load. If I click that Load button, I can go find on my flash drive, or in this case my OneDrive. I have it under Resources, Vray, HDRI. This is a day HDRI. It's the Malibu Overlook. And there it is, the Visopt file. I'll say Open. And all the drawers close. And Vray crashes. That was not part of the plan. But it did conveniently for me. So let me make sure I save Rhino, just in case. See if Vray comes back. Come on, Vray. See, it happens to me too. Okay, so clearly Vray doesn't like me. Let's open that Rhino file again. So it's the master site 2018. You'll get this message a lot. Do you want to replace the existing material? Just say replace all material. All right, let me go back to my Vray options. I don't know for sure that it loaded, so I'm going to go into the camera, make sure that the camera is on and it's set for 400, which is what it said it was supposed to be set for. So it did load, even though Vray crashed. So what this did is it preloaded all the various settings. So the refraction background was set at 5.0. That was exactly what I said in here somewhere. There it is, at 5.0. So it was trying to help you out so you can load all this stuff in place for you. The only thing that can be off when you load it is it might not know for sure where your actual HDRIs are living on your flash drive. So I'm going to go back into my refraction background, click the map, click Preview, and see if it loads. If I get the gray square like this, it doesn't know where my file is, so I've got to go find it. So I'll go back. This is in my flash drive. This is in resources, Vray, HDRI, day, and it is the Malibu Overlook. You can see that I've collected a lot of HDRI over time. And this is the 3K. And I'll say open. Now if I click preview, yep, I'm seeing it. That's good. So I'll say OK. I need to go back to the GI skylight, do the same thing, and look for that Overlook ENV. Open. And now I have both of those installed. So theoretically, at this point, all of my V-Ray settings are correct. I've loaded my HDRIs. I have my sun. Everything should be good for the render. If you're doing the Lake Tahoe scene, the only difference is you probably won't pick the Malibu HDRI, but any of the other ones tend to work fine. And I can help you through that if you get stuck. It's always hard because I'm demoing one versus the other, but they'll end up working out in the long run. So I'm going to close my V-Ray options, and now it's time to start thinking about what is the ideal view that I want to render as my exterior view. And so you now have the decision power to showcase your building in the best way possible. So what does that view mean? Where should it be? So a couple things. One, you can of course start to zoom in on your building. You might even take your block and do a zoom selected so you're seeing just your building. And you might start saying, oh, I'm going to orient myself. Oh, I kind of like that view or maybe that view, etc. You have to kind of play around with that. But there are other things that are built into Rhino and or V-Ray that can change what you're seeing. So if I have nothing selected at all, and I look over here at my properties window, we see under viewport that it is a perspective. That's fine. Under camera, we see a lens length of 50. A 50 millimeter lens, if you're familiar with photography, is kind of like a telephoto lens. You don't get a lot of wide angle. It's a fairly narrow angle lens. It's good for modeling, but it's not necessarily the best for rendering. If I was doing an exterior photo, I might shoot personally with a 28 millimeter. So I might change that lens length to 28, and when I do that, it changes the view of the camera a little bit more. So there it is at 28, a little bit more perspective to it, versus 50, like that. See how the sides droop just a little bit more? It's a little bit more exaggerated perspective. If I was doing an interior shot, I might do an 18 or even less for a very wide angle. When I do that and zoom in, it's a very different look from the outside. So for me personally, the 18 is a little bit much for the outside. I prefer the 28, but it's up to you to decide what feels right. So I might change this back to, let's do an 18 or 28. Okay, that feels pretty good. You also want to think about where you're taking your view from. So if I took this view, for example, I'm actually floating in space. I have a jetpack on when I took the picture because I can't stand there and take the picture. Or I guess better, in current trends, you'd have a drone. This would be shot from a drone. There's nothing wrong with doing a rendering that's shot from the drone, but you have to be aware that that's what's happening. If I wanted a rendering that was shot as if I were standing somewhere, I need to be closer to where I'd actually be standing. So it would be more like that shot, which is not a bad shot. If I think about rules of composition, the rule of thirds, it works out pretty nice. Now, I recognize I've maybe done this a few times, so I kind of know where the right sweet spot is on this kind of a rendering. But you'll have to figure out what that sweet spot is for you and your rendering. So once I have this kind of sweet spot figured out, I like this is looking pretty good, this is where I'm going to do my ultimate rendering, I want to go ahead and save this view so I can return to it. The truth is that when you do these renderings, you're going to do this exterior rendering at least 10 times between now and the final. Probably more like 25. Because you're going to be changing things, you're going to be evolving things. There's no reason the view needs to change or you need to waste your time finding that ideal view over and over and over again. So what we want to do is we want to save this view as a rendered view. So I'll go up to my little triangle next to perspective. I'll come down to set view and go to named views. and I'm going to save this. So I'll click the Save As button, and I'm going to call this maybe exterior, 01. I like to number them because chances are you're going to have more than one exterior view, more than one interior view. So I'll call this exterior 01, and I'll say OK. And now instead of saying perspective up here, it says exterior 01. So let's say I continue working and I'm doing stuff and whatever, and then I come back and say, you know what, I want to do that render again. If I go to the little triangle and I go to Set View and I go to Exterior 1, which is now listed at the very bottom, it'll immediately jump me back to that view. It's kind of like a saved scene in SketchUp when you save that scene. So I can go back and redo this render over and over and over again. OK. So now I have this part figured out. Let me see if there's anything else I want to talk about. I know this is a lot for you guys to take in. Part 7, I talk about going back to your original file and making sure you're assigning the materials correctly. Then somehow I go from part 7. Clearly, I didn't do the numbering correctly. I go from part 7 back to part 5. Whoops, sorry. Handout's not good. And that is ocean, grass, and rocks. We already put the ocean in. I do have a few other things that might be useful for you if you want to put them in. If we go back to my Rhino blocks, if I go to Resources and I go to Rhino Box Library, and I go to Landscape, I have some grass and I have some rocks. Those might or might not be relevant for your particular setup, but you can download those the same way that you download anything else. I'll probably come back and revisit the bunch grass in a little more detail because I can tell that you guys are glossing over at this point. So I don't know how relevant it is for me to go through it right now. But both of these work just like the other blocks. They're just smaller pieces that you can insert and kind of add some more texture. So the only thing left is I need a little bit of texture on the hillside. I didn't put any material on that hillside. There's a few grass textures that I can pick from. None of them look that great, which is why the grass block helps. The grass block helps cover things up a little bit and can help with the rendering, but it also dramatically slows down the rendering. So we'll come back to that in a little bit. But for today's purposes, I'll go back to my materials, and I'll make sure on my materials, somewhere in here I probably have grass. Nope, I don't. So I have to bring in some grass. So I'll right-click and say Load Material. And because this is the site file, I'm assigning the material here. It's not related to the building, it's the site. So that's why I'm assigning it here. And I'll go into my resources, my Vray materials, and I probably have some grass somewhere. It's probably under landscape, and then grass. And I have grass with flowers, and I have a grassy hill background. The grassy hill background is not the best material, but it's fairly generic. It's kind of a splotty green-brown material. I'm going to put that on for right now for lack of something better. And let me figure out where it went. There it is. See? Not that great. And I'll apply material to selection, or I could actually apply it to the terrain layer. That would be even better. Apply material to layer. Let me put it on terrain. Say OK. And let me make sure that my material should be applied by layer. OK, so now I have it all set up. It's time to do that first rendering. So I'll go to my Vray options. And remember, just like I did when I was doing the skyscraper, I go to Output. And instead of doing the full-size rendering at the very beginning, we're going to do it small. So I want to make sure that the view that I'm seeing is exactly what I'm getting. So I'll unlock the image aspect ratio, get the new view aspect, lock it again, and then we'll make this small. So we'll do a height of maybe 150, which gives me a width of 311, and then we can do a quick render to sort out how it actually worked, or how it looks. And this is a good place to kind of double check, did I miss anything? Like, I didn't apply material to that piece, so it looks kind of funky. The rest of it's coming in okay. The rest of my scene looks all right. I'm going to have to deal a little bit with the horizon line. We'll touch that one up a little bit later. I need the material there, but generally it's okay. So this is not by any means ready to be the final quality render, but it's the first step at an exterior render, which is what I'm looking for today. So even if you don't have all the details set up in your file to do the high quality render that I'm asking for at the end today, at least you should have some massing by now, some basic stuff. Get that massing into your site. And remember, you can always go back to this file and make changes. You keep working on this file, you make changes. So let's say I really want there to be a fire pit right here. Showed up down below somewhere. There it is. Yeah, it's a really big fire pit. Anyway, I want something there. I save this file. Then I go back to my master site here. I go back to my block manager. And I can now update. See, it says linked file is newer. We can update it. Replace all the materials. Yep. Give it a second. There you go. Now it's up to date. And there's that piece with the block in it. So you can always go back and work on it. The one last thing that I'll add before I turn you loose today is that this retreat base file is safe for you to work on at home or wherever. The master site file, this other one where we're going to do our renderings, you're not going to want to open that at home because it's going to mess, especially, well, you won't want to open it at home if you don't have Vray installed because it's going to mess with Vray settings. It's going to change light settings long term. So in terms of working toward the final, spend all the time at home in places where Vray is not installed, working on this file, making it better, knowing that it will update when you get to school to do the rendering here. You're going to want to try to do the renderings in this room because it's the one with the network rendering in it and what have you. So this is the best place. The other room does have Vray installed. Technically it has the spawners, but they're not set to auto start, so it doesn't help too much. As much as I've tried to make that happen, they don't really want to do it. So this room is kind of your best bet for the big scale network rendering and that sort of thing. Are there any other big questions? I know I went through a lot of stuff today, but I kind of have to. So next class, when you guys come in on Monday, we're going to set up the interior render to do that one. And we'll talk more about bringing blocks into your file and getting those ready for you. So between now and then, it's Wednesday. Next class is Monday. Try to get at least some of the interior stuff modeled so that you're ready to set up an interior render. Remember, all of this is designed to help you out. This is your final. The more you work on it, the better your final is going to be. So spend the time now, and it'll get easier later on. I promise you, you will be more busy at the end of the semester than you are right now. So spend your time now when you're not that busy, and it will be easier at the end. Make sense? I'm a really nice person, I promise. All right.